Welcome to In the Cool of the Day, and I'm your host, Reverend Dr. Sharon Anderson, and this is your segment from Behind the Podium, Conversations about Law and Faith. And it's Women's History Month, and we just celebrated International Women's Day. And I could not think of a better guest to kick off this Women's History Month with from Behind the Podium than Elizabeth White. Good afternoon, Elizabeth.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Elizabeth is an accomplished author, has spoke at TEDx about a very, very important topic, not just to women, but to men and anybody that has found themselves 55, unemployed, and faking normal. And in this time and in this season when we're experiencing issues where the retirement isn't enough, Social Security isn't enough, we just find ourselves in crisis at 55 and older, and particularly women. I thought it would be important to have this discussion with you, Elizabeth, and for you to give us some insight on how to get through these troubling times. So tell us about your book, 55, Unemployed and Faking Normal, and tell us why you wrote it.
I wrote this book because I have the lived experience of I was a little older than 55, but unemployed and also faking normal. And at the time, I wrote an essay that described what it felt like to land here. What happens when you are someone who's had career choice, privilege, decent incomes, and suddenly you are jettisoned without a net from the workforce and you have trouble getting back in. And the essay described my own experience and that of a number of my friends. And I thought this was happening to just a small group of us, because what had happened was I would notice people who were doing okay in the past, kind of a little worn down at the heel. Someone, you go to a restaurant, they're ordering a salad when they normally order an entree, they're ordering mineral water when you knew they would normally get a glass of Chardonnay. So there were little signs, people, hair kind of not done when in the past it would have always been done. So we ultimately had a conversation. One woman in particular, we talked about, just took the mask down and talked about what was really happening to us. So the essay grew out of that.
Right. So before we get to the essay, which catapulted you into writing this book, and now you're speaking all over the world, really, about this issue that's so relevant and important, tell us about Elizabeth before the book, so we know the platform and where you came from, and then how you transitioned.
So I've had a very cool career, zigging and zagging. I've been an entrepreneur. I've been a C-suite executive at a mid-size nonprofit. I've worked for the World Bank. So I went to the bank. I was about 30. I bought my first condo then. Things were going well. I went back, got a second master's, a Harvard MBA. From there, caught the entrepreneurial bug, launched a small retail chain called BlackBerry. Things were kind of going along. BlackBerry did well, but not well enough to support me in the way that I wanted to be supported. We sold decorative home products, Afrocentric decorative home products. And I was sourcing from small vendors and from Africans as well throughout the diaspora, and at points couldn't get the volume that I needed to really kind of grow this the way I wanted. Got then some consultancies, and the first one was supposed to last 6 months, lasted 7 years. This was around 2002. Got a second one on top of that was supposed to last a year, lasted 4, and that combined income was really great. 2009 happened. What happens when there's a retrenchment and you're the consultant?
Yes.
You're going to go.
Yes.
And so within 6 months, I lost both of those jobs and went from very good income to zero. And at that point, I'm now sort of, 57-ish. And what I found out is my network didn't work like it used to.
Wow.
So I'm used to, jumping out there, have a good network.
Yes.
I hear about the job before it's posted because my good friend is in the loop of, what's happening. And
yeah, what I've said is I have never applied. I applied to for one job in my life.
Right.
And so when you in your 20s and you apply for one job and then you find yourself in your 50s, it's very, very different. It's very, very different.
Very different. And so my phone wasn't ringing. And I still had this incredible background. I've got, the education, the props and credentials. And you don't realize initially that it's going to take a long time to get work. So your lifestyle sort of stays the same.
Sure.
And by the time you realize, ooh, you may be out here a while, you have spent money you might not otherwise have spent if you knew you had to really hunker down. So one of the things I would say to you, if you're older, count on hunkering down right from the beginning.
From the beginning, yes.
I went back in, got a job, loved it, didn't get along that well with the boss I had. And if you don't get along with your boss, then it's not going to work out.
Sure.
So then I was back out here again. And it was during that period that I had the conversation that I described earlier with friends. Because by then, a lot of people, friends of mine, were out here. And this book, I needed to read something that spoke to me when I was during this period. Because when you're here, you're really in a place of, can be pretty deep despair and uncertainty. And so you can't really get through some really densely written, Brookings Institute tome. You need, I wanted to write a book that the image I had in my mind is that I'm standing at my back fence talking to my neighbor. I wanted you to feel like I'm sitting here with you, and what you've gone through, I've been through.
And that's identifying what's it, so somebody can identify with what you're going through. So it's not 50 feet type level discussion about the statistics and about the policies and about the process. It really is from the heart. And as the Bible says, you're overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the power of your testimony. And so it's that testimony that spoke to me in reading the book, and the different aspects of it that really was encouraging and empowering. So it's an empowering book.
Yes, and there's a place for all the policy, but I think what we're seeing now is that the safety nets are being shredded.
Yes.
So this book is really about what can you do from where you're sitting with your own agency, because I say in the book, the cavalry's not coming. There's no big rescue, no big bailout, there's no Prince Charming. And if you're expecting that, you'll be waiting a long time. And so what can you do personally from where you're sitting with your network of friends and family around you?
And I want to talk about what they can do in a minute, but one thing that really struck me about the book is that when you get into this place of transition, I'll call it, because it's a place of transition, you feel shame, and that shame leads you to be silent, and that shame leads you into isolation. So let's speak to that. How do you address that in your book? What do you tell your reader and those that are experiencing these issues?
The shame is a big piece because you get no points in our culture for speaking about your financial woes. And I think now with social media, I saw a poster the other day that said no one's life is as good as their Instagram feed. And so there's a lot now in kind of how we present. And the faking normal, in my own case, because I still had some of the attributes. I still lived in the condo I bought when I was 30. Now, I maybe think the carpet needs to be cleaned
Yes.
and some other things, but so to just look, I still had clothes that I'd had before. So you can fake the appearance, but even if you look in your friendship circle, you will see who is and who's not.
Yes.
But the shame is, you're not supposed to land here, not you.
Right,
Okay?
exactly.
You have
Harvard degree.
all the degree.
Yes,
You've been
yes,
doing well a
yes.
long time, and because there's sort of what I call this positive aging happy talk. So what we see about people retiring, they're on a yacht, their hair is blowing in the wind, they're drinking, their champagne, and they're, or there's what I call the Reinvention Stories, the lawyer turned pastry chef, or the accountant who's now a cabaret singer. Those are sort of the images that we often read about.
Yes.
And if that's not happening to you, and nobody is telling the truth about the real retirement crisis, then you really feel like you're out here by yourself.
Yes.
So that shame comes from you think you're not measuring up to the norm when you actually don't know what the norm is.
That's a great point. That's a great point. And one thing that you said in the book that I thought was so relevant and powerful was that think strategy and not failure. So once you realize that you're actually part of the norm and what you've just spoke to is the exception, the lawyer turned pastry chef, et cetera, then you have to reinvent your way of thinking about your norm. Because this period of transition doesn't have to be a period of failure. And your worth is not dependent upon the job, the money, or the cars, because your worth is really what's inside of you. And so you have to look back deep inside of you to begin to think about the strategy on how you're going to transition into this new norm that you're experiencing.
And the reason I say think strategy, not failure, you may and very likely will have to do some things you don't want to do. You may have to get rid of that gas guzzling SUV. You may have to downsize. You may have to spend, I was talking to a woman recently who lived for a year on her millennial daughter's couch. You may have to do some things you don't want to do. And the think strategy, not failure is these are just interim steps. Someone said to me the other day, don't put a period where God put a comma.
That's it.
And so you may right now have to go on to food stamps. You may right now.
And I want to stop you right there for a second because we're going to go to strategy, but we're going to take a break. Thank you for watching. We'll be right back. So before we broke for the commercial break, you were telling us about the think strategy, not failure process. So explain to us what you meant by that and how we do that in this period of transition.
Because many of us in this sort of, in the new financial normal or in this new period of financial insecurity, we're going to have to make some changes that we maybe don't want to make. We may have to downsize. That starter castle that we're living in, out and wherever, we may not be able to do that. We may have to get rid of a car that the car note's too much. And I was mentioning a friend of mine talking about living with her millennial daughter for a year, sleeping on her couch. And so it can be minor change or fairly significant change. If you internalize that as failure, if you, and I was saying, someone just said to me, God, don't put a period where God put a comma. I thought that was so powerful because it's saying the story's not over. It's not over. And you may need to make an adjustment that you're not happy with, but I want you to think of it as the strategy to go another round.
Yes.
Rather than the story ends here.
Absolutely.
And many people that I talk to, because once I did the essay, people now can find your email address.
Yes.
And I started to get emails, and the comments, which were maybe a paragraph, the emails are 2 and 3 pages, single space. So I heard a lot of stories. And the hardest part was the failure piece. People, I'm a loser.
Yes.
I'm the only one in my family. Or a situation where it's a spouse, but the other one is doing well, and the spouse that's doing well doesn't understand kind of what happened to you.
Yes.
So to think of doing what you need to do to go another round. And that could be things that you never thought that you'd have to do.
And what you said is so important, and it really is. It is a biblical principle, but we have to look at God's plan and not ours. And so if a door closes, you also hear that when one door closes, God always opens another door. The poem about footprints, as you're walking and you don't see where you're going, God's footprints are there because he's carrying you through these times. So oftentimes, these periods of transition is really God redirecting us to do something greater, to do something better. As you said, the young woman or the woman was there with her millennial daughter. She might not have known that the millennial daughter needed her there just as much as she needed to be there.
Yes.
And so there's things going on in the atmosphere, and I would say, because I'm a Christian, in the heavenlies, that we know nothing about, that God is doing in this transition period. But what's so empowering about your book is really that statement that we cannot internalize this period as failure, because if we internalize it as failure, then we get stuck. And then it's hard to strategize because we're looking through life not in the rose-colored glasses way, but in the dark-colored glasses way, and that can lead to depression, that can lead to medication, and so this book to me was just so empowering again, because it gave us another way and another piece of the puzzle for us to be encouraged to keep moving.
Now, I never expected to become the poster child for broke boomers. Okay, that was never the fantasy. And I would say, I remember when I did my website that I didn't want my picture. I didn't want to be known. I remember when I first learned that my essay was going to be published, they had not seen me. We were interacting by email, and the profile of the woman that they used to go with my essay was an older white woman, and I didn't correct them. So this place of hiding, this place of, I was in a grocery store a couple of months ago, and somebody came up to me and said, "Oh, I know you, you're that woman who's," and they were, kind of searching for the word,
Sure.
and I said, "Broke? Yes, that's you."
Right.
So, and this has been like an incredible journey for me.
Yes.
And I feel I would not have chosen it, but now I embrace it.
Well, it chose you, and just as we were talking about, it catapulted you into your destiny. You're on TED Talks, which is not easy to get on. You're an accomplished author. You're known at least throughout the country. Not for being the broke woman, but really for being the woman who's empowering other people to get through very difficult times. And I never thought, and I've had some challenging times, and I never thought in my 20s, as an accomplished attorney, that I would have challenging times in my 50s. I never thought in my 40s, when I was speaking all over the country and just doing my thing, that in my 50s there would be a period of transition that would be unexpected. And I found you on Facebook. And, it really spoke to my spirit about it's okay. You know, it's okay to be in a period of transition. And I'm a woman of faith, and I go to church every Sunday, and I believe God, and I know that God hasn't left me. But to read something, you know, very, again, down to earth, powerful, and birthed out of experience, gave me comfort, like you said, that I was not alone in the process. And so in your book, you talk about resilience circles. And about having that circle of people that keep you together. So tell us about that, because that's so key, I think, to your transition process.
So doing this by yourself is crazy making. Okay, you will start circling the drain. The tapes, we all have our stuck stories and our tapes, and what I find is we all need someone who can hold a mirror up to us and tell us the truth. Help us remember what we're good at. Help us remember what we know, what we've accomplished, and where we've been. And if you're trying to do this all alone without that, it's just going to get really dicey at some time. So what I did in the book, I had a group of people, including my mother and my daughter, that I told the truth to. That I, in fact, with one friend, we used to have this game where I might say to her, my phone's about to be turned off. And she would say, well, my, water bill's about to be turned off, and she would win. And it sounds like, why, that sounds depressing. But what it meant was, to at least to the two of us, even if we had to, go on an interview or go someplace else where you need to pull it together, that there's some place in the world that you're telling the truth. Okay, you can't, because what happens if you don't have that? When you get to the interview, you're going to be leaking. You may not even know it, but the person who's interviewing you will pick up there's something there that they're not sure that they want in the work environment. So you need some place, some group of people that you can go to, tell the truth to, get all that out. And then when you need to be in a setting where you got to be on point, you can be on point.
Because that circle of not going to pay I'm not be able to pay my phone bill. I'm not really good enough for this interview. The tapes, I might not get this if I don't get this. So all of that's happening during the interview, and that's why you're saying there's that leakage there, and people can see it. And people can see it. So the resilience circle, or sense it. So that resilience circle is so important, even if it's not more than one person. At least there's one person that you can confide in and talk to, and like you said, tell the truth. So you get all the fears and the stuff that you don't really want to reveal to the world out.
And also because we're actually not going back. We're in a new period. This is the first time that millions of us are going to live well into our 80s. And millions of us are going to live that long in relatively good health. So we're going to still have our capacity and faculties. And we don't have role models yet to support that. We don't have policies. We don't have, kind of how do you live that long? And particularly when you start to look at that, almost a third of us have not saved a dime. So 55 to 64, about a third of Americans have not saved a penny. And then when you look at, of those of us who have saved, the median value of that retirement account is something like $100,000. I think 104. 104, better than zero. Okay, but how long is that going to last? 2 years, 3 years, and then you're at zero. So this is a huge issue when you look at how long that runway is when we look at the lifespan. And I say, we were talking a little earlier, I say to people, this is not a pesky little boomer problem. Okay? Gen Xers, many of them don't have pensions, and no millennials have
Yes.
pensions.
That's right.
So we are
right.
just the first up this hill into the unknown of what does it mean to live this much longer time span.
Yes, yes.
And this is why we're going to have this mindset shift. Many of us, if you get jettisoned out of the workforce and you're in your late 50s, the likelihood of getting back in at the level that you were before, it starts to decline precipitously the longer that you're out. So this means the question that I ask and talk about in the book is, how do you live a richly textured and connected life on a more modest income? Because that's what many of us are going to do and have to be facing. So that's why I look at tiny houses and multi-generational houses and co-housing. Because for many people, housing is that big nut to crack.
Yes. So we're almost out of time, but if you had to leave anything with the listeners in the last few seconds of our discussion, what would it be?
I want people, even if you are in deep despair, around the edges, what I want this book to do is create the possibility of hopefulness. I want this book to help people sort of think in a different way. We get stuck in our stories and we're used to kind of moving in linear fashion and not considering kind of possibility. I was telling you, I was just in San Miguel, Allende, Mexico, meeting with American women who could not afford to live in the States just on Social Security and moved to San Miguel Allende and were flourishing there. And I talked to women whose monthly income was from $650 a month to about $2,200 a month. And they found community there, and they were able to find small apartments there that they could not find here. These are women, some of them who had not traveled before. So this is what I mean by the possibility. You don't have to move to Mexico, but I want us, all of us who are in this period, to start thinking about what's possible that I'm maybe am not considering. What friend of mine could we maybe join households? So this book is to kind of plant those ideas.
Thank you for being my guest. Elizabeth, thank you for such a wonderful discussion. If you want to get the book, 55 Unemployed and Faking Normal, it's available on Amazon. This has been a wonderful discussion. What a wonderful way to end our discussion during Women's History Month. We want you, if you're in this period of transition, to keep hope alive. God has your back. He has a destiny and a process for you. Make sure you're thinking strategy, not failure. This has been Behind the Podium, conversations about law and faith. God bless you.